I never thought my own blood would betray me like a stranger. Those were the only words that left his mouth the day everything fell apart. Words soaked in disbelief, grief, and the quiet kind of pain that doesn't scream, but stays lodged deep in the chest. One moment, he was a father heading out for a birthday lunch. The next, he was a man left behind in a sterile hallway, holding a suitcase instead of a cake. That was the day something inside him broke, and something far stronger began to awaken. Betrayal doesn't always come from enemies. Sometimes it walks in wearing the face you once loved most. What followed was not just a story of revenge, but of reclamation, of dignity, voice, and peace earned the hard way. Before we dive into today's story, I recommend you hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell, so you never miss a new story filled with drama, resilience, and unexpected twists. If you enjoy this video, type 1 in the comments. If not, type 0 to let me know how I can make better content for you. Now, settle in, get comfortable, and maybe grab your favorite drink, because this is a tale you won't want to miss. Let's get started. I woke before sunrise, the way I always did when I was still climbing poles for the power company. The house creaked around me, its bones old but steady, like mine. Outside the window, the Blue Ridge Mountains were still draped in morning mist, and the smell of coffee filled the kitchen. Strong, black, and familiar. It was my 63rd birthday, though I hadn't said the words out loud. Birthdays hadn't meant much since Helen passed, but this one felt different. My son had texted the night before. "Lunch is on me, Dad. Dress nice." I took it as a sign. Maybe we'd start talking again. Maybe things weren't as bad as they'd felt these last few years. I made pancakes, just like Helen used to. 2 plates instead of 1. The table looked less empty that way. I ironed my favorite flannel shirt, combed what was left of my hair, and polished my boots. When the knock came, I felt a flutter in my chest that I hadn't felt in a long time, something close to happiness. Caleb stood in the doorway, tall and restless, wearing a brewery sweatshirt and that distracted smile of his. His wife, Jordan, followed, all perfume and precision. She handed me a bouquet from the gas station, the kind with a barcode still stuck to the plastic. "Happy birthday, Frank," she said, already checking her phone. "Well," I said, forcing cheer into my voice, "you two clean up nice. Where's the big lunch spot?" Caleb grinned. "It's a surprise, Dad. Get your coat." So, I did. I grabbed the old brown jacket Helen once patched at the elbow, locked the door, and climbed into the back seat of their SUV. The smell of air freshener hit me first. Too sweet, too sterile. We passed downtown Asheville, the old diner where Caleb and I used to eat burgers after his baseball games, the brewery he swore would make him rich. I waited for him to turn toward the restaurants. Instead, we took the road that wound up into the mountains. "Not many places up here," I said lightly. Jordan's eyes stayed on the GPS. "It's just a few more miles." The air grew colder, the trees thickened. When the tires crunched onto gravel, I looked up and saw a sign carved into polished wood, Blue Ridge Haven Senior Living Facility. At first, my brain refused to register the words. "Caleb," I said quietly, "what is this?" He cleared his throat. "Dad, we need to talk. You've been alone too long. It's not safe." "Not safe?" My voice cracked. "I wired half this state, son. I think I can handle a microwave and a lawnmower." "It's just temporary," Jordan chimed in, smiling the way people smile when they've already made the decision for you. She pulled a folder from her bag. "You signed these last year, remember? Power of attorney, medical release, everything's taken care of." I took the papers. My name stared back at me in neat, perfect cursive, not mine. My real signature slants left, shaky from years of work. This one was clean, practiced. "You went through my files," I said. Caleb sighed. "Please don't make this harder." The words hollowed me out. I wanted to yell, to grab my things, but something stopped me. Maybe it was shock, maybe pride. The receptionist smiled brightly as if this were a hotel. "Welcome, Mr. Ellison," she said. "We're so glad you're here." They led me down a hallway that smelled of bleach and boiled vegetables. My room was small, beige, shared with a man named Bert who snored like a generator. The window faced the parking lot, not the forest. Caleb placed my suitcase by the bed, awkward and guilty. "I'll come by tomorrow," he said. "Don't bother," I replied. When they left, the silence was so thick it pressed against my chest. I sat on the edge of the bed, still wearing my coat, watching the sky darken behind the bars of the window screen. The nurse came by with cake, dry, square, and flavorless. I thanked her and pushed it aside. My phone was gone. For safety, they'd said. No contact, no control, no voice. That night, I lay awake listening to the hum of the oxygen machine across the room. I thought about all the things I'd repaired in my life, lines, engines, people, and how no one had ever taught me how to fix betrayal. When I closed my eyes, I saw Helen smiling, holding a plate of pancakes, asking why I looked so serious. Sometime past midnight, I sat up and stared at the reflection in the dark window. The face looking back at me was older, smaller, but not broken. I reached for the notepad on the bedside table and began to write. Time, date, names, everything I could remember. I didn't know what I'd do with it yet, but it felt like plugging a wire into something alive again. "They think I'm finished," I whispered. "They forgot I still know the circuits." If you've ever trusted someone so completely only to realize they'd been planning your downfall all along, stay with me, because what happens next will make your heart ache and your blood boil. Morning came early at Blue Ridge Haven. The sound of rubber soles squeaked along the corridor, mixing with the faint hum of gospel music leaking from a radio at the nurse's station. Breakfast trays clattered, and the smell of powdered eggs drifted under the door. I woke up before Bert did. He snored in uneven bursts, his chest rising like a machine running out of fuel. I lay still, counting the rhythm of the noise around me. That was how I'd survived every dangerous job, by listening first, acting second. When the nurse came in, she greeted me with that sing-song sweetness I'd already learned to hate. "Good morning, sweetheart," she said, tightening my blood pressure cuff until my arm went numb. "How are we today?" The "we" grated against me like sand in a wire spool. I forced a smile. "Still breathing," I said. She chuckled like I'd told a joke, scribbled something on her clipboard, and left me staring at the door she didn't bother to close all the way. After breakfast, I asked about my phone. "Your son took care of that," another nurse said. "He thought it'd be safer if you didn't have to worry about calls and passwords." Her voice was cheerful, but the words hit like cold water. I nodded as if I understood, though my heart pounded. No phone meant no bank, no email, no contact, no proof I existed outside these beige walls. I thanked her politely, then sat by the window and wrote everything down. Her name, the time, the exact phrasing. I didn't know what I'd use it for yet, but habits from a lifetime of documenting circuits and outages came back naturally. Bert stirred around noon, groaning. "Lunch already?" he asked. His voice was gravelly, his eyes unfocused. "They'll bring it," I said. He mumbled something about his daughter and Charlotte, how she hadn't called in years, and then drifted back to sleep. I looked at him and saw my possible future, forgotten, tolerated, slowly erased. When the lunch cart arrived, I pushed away the tray of gray stew and congealed gravy. "Not hungry," I told the aide. She hesitated, made a note on her tablet, and left. I wasn't testing her kindness, I was testing the system. I wanted to see how quickly they'd report a behavioral concern. It didn't take long. 10 minutes later, another nurse peeked in. "You feeling okay, Mr. Ellison? Skipping meals isn't like you." I smiled politely. "I'm still figuring out what's like me in this place." She blinked, uncertain what to say, then backed out. That afternoon, a new nurse entered, young, with her braids pinned neatly under her cap, and eyes that seemed to see through walls. "Name's Tasha," she said. Her tone wasn't patronizing, it was professional, grounded. As she wrapped the blood pressure cuff around my arm, she looked me dead in the eye. "You don't belong here, do you?" The question caught me off guard. I opened my mouth, then laughed softly. "Do any of us?" She smiled, just barely. "Some do. But you, nah." You still look like you're working on a project. Maybe it was the way she said it, matter of fact, no pity, that made something unclench inside me. Just keeping notes, I said. Good, she replied. Notes keep people honest. She adjusted the monitor, jotted my vitals, and left without another word. For the first time in days, the room didn't feel entirely hostile. That evening, I sat under the buzzing fluorescent light, watching shadows stretch across the ceiling. I thought about Caleb asking me to sign refinancing papers last spring, how he'd brushed off my questions with a son's weary patience. Just tax stuff, Dad. I'd wanted to believe him. Now those memories felt like traps I'd walked into blindfolded. Down the hall, nurses laughed by the vending machine. Their voices echoed through the corridor, bright and careless. I wasn't angry at them. I was angry at myself for letting my life shrink to a clipboard and a locked door. The feeling built in my chest until it cracked open. And for the first time in years, I cried, not for pity, but for the man who'd once fixed power lines and storms, and now couldn't even fix his own situation. When the lights dimmed for night shift, I pulled my notebook from under the mattress. I reread my entries, times, names, patterns. Each page looked like a map, and somewhere on that map was a way out. At the bottom of the newest page, I wrote one line. If they think I'm harmless, they won't see me coming. Outside the door, soft humming drifted down the hall. Tasha again, finishing her rounds. I closed my eyes and listened, the melody steady as the pulse of a current. Above me, the fluorescent light flickered, buzzing like a bad wire. Faulty connection, I muttered. Just needs a steady hand. I smiled in the dark. The circuit wasn't dead. It was just waiting for me to turn the power back on. By the third morning, I could tell time without a clock. The rhythm of this place never changed. The shuffle of slippers on tile, the clang of breakfast trays, the distant hum of the elevator that never seemed to arrive fast enough. I'd memorized it all. The nurses' shifts, the cleaning schedule, even the way the security guard lingered too long by the vending machine during the night shift. When you've wired entire towns, you learn to see systems, and this one had flaws big enough to crawl through. But that morning, the routine faltered. Ruby, the night nurse, didn't show. The staff whispered about some emergency, and Tasha was pulling a double. The energy in the air felt different, like the moment before a thunderstorm. Even Bert, who usually slept through everything, muttered, "Something's off today," before rolling back over. I caught Tasha's eye as she passed. She gave me a knowing look, not pity, not concern, but awareness. Later, during breakfast, she leaned close enough that her voice barely carried. "You ever play the lottery, Mr. Ellison?" I smirked. I used to fix the lines that powered those machines. Closest I ever got to winning. She grinned and slipped something small into my palm under the table. "Found this in the lost and found drawer. Tucked inside an old Bible. Thought you might need a little luck." It was a folded lottery ticket, yellowed around the edges. "Don't spend it all in one place," she whispered before walking away. I laughed softly to myself. A lottery ticket. Just what I needed. A cosmic joke to match my situation. Still, when you're trapped, even hope disguised as nonsense feels like oxygen. I tucked it into my pocket. That night, when the facility finally quieted down, I found myself in the common room. The ancient desktop computer in the corner still hummed like it was running on fumes. I waited until the nurse's footsteps faded, then slid into the chair and typed the numbers. My hands trembled as the results loaded. Winner, $12 million. The words blinked on the screen like a hallucination. For a long moment, I just stared, the glow washing over my face. My breath hitched. I checked again, certain I'd made a mistake, but there it was, $12 million. I looked around the empty room, half expecting someone to appear and laugh at me. It wasn't joy that hit first, it was fear. I thought of Caleb's smile when he dropped me off, the way Jordan's voice went syrupy when she called me sweetheart. They'd find a way to take it. They always did. My pulse hammered as I printed the confirmation and folded it small enough to fit inside my boot. My heart hadn't raced like that since the day I climbed a live transformer in a rainstorm. Back then, I held power in my hands. Tonight, it felt like power was finally holding me again. The next morning, I could barely focus. Every sound felt amplified. The buzz of lights, the scrape of trays, the whisper of fabric. I wanted to tell Tasha, but I didn't. Trust had become a fragile thing, too easily broken. Instead, I watched, I observed, and I planned. At lunch, I overheard two aides talking near the hallway. "We're clearing out old files this week," one said. "Finance wants the locked cabinet emptied." My pulse spiked. That cabinet was near the rec room. When they left, I waited 10 minutes, then slipped in. Among the papers waiting for disposal was a folder with my name on it. Ellison, Frank, Financial Hold. Inside was a single page signed by Caleb. Assets transferred for safekeeping. My stomach twisted. It wasn't paranoia. He'd been bleeding me dry long before the nursing home. I nearly didn't hear Tasha enter behind me. "You shouldn't be in here," she said quietly. I turned, ready to make an excuse, but she saw the paper in my hand. "What is that?" "Proof," I said, "of what he's done." She hesitated, eyes darting toward the hall. "That's not legal. You need help." I nodded. "You know someone?" "A volunteer lawyer. Comes every other Friday," she whispered. 3 days from now." My heart kicked like an engine. "Then that's when we move." She frowned. "Your son's on the visitor list that same day." For a second, the air thickened between us. I smiled grimly. "Then we'll make him believe I've lost my mind. Let him think I'm harmless." Tasha's lips curved into the smallest of smiles. That Mr. Ellison might actually work. That night, I took apart the bedside lamp. The bulb flickered weakly at first, then flared to life after a few adjustments. The wiring was bad, loose, corroded. I tightened each connection, steadying the current until the light burned bright and steady. I sat back, staring at the glow, feeling it hum against my skin. "You didn't switch me off, Caleb," I whispered. "You just rerouted me." The lamp kept shining long after I fell asleep, the room bathed in soft, electric defiance. The next 3 days moved like the slow click of a clock before detonation. I counted every shift change, every squeak of the food cart, every nurse's rotation as if memorizing the choreography of a machine I intended to dismantle. My notebook, once thin, had grown thicker with notes, names, and overheard conversations. I hid it behind the dresser, inside a loose wall panel I pried open using the back of a spoon. Nobody here noticed much. People assumed old men stopped building things once they stopped mattering. They were wrong. Tasha had said we needed to play a long game, so I became the kind of man this place expected me to be. Slow, forgetful, confused. I lost my hearing aid, stared blankly through lunch, and mumbled to myself as I shuffled down the hall. When I dropped my fork, I didn't pick it up. When nurses asked how I was feeling, I'd smile vaguely and answer, "Remind me, what day is it again?" Within 2 days, I heard whispers from the staff. "Mr. Ellison's decline is accelerating." Perfect. The more invisible I became, the safer my real plan would be. Still, pretending to be weak was its own kind of wound. There's a special humiliation in acting broken when you know you're still whole. Every sweetheart and poor thing burned a little deeper. At night, I'd lie awake thinking about all the men I'd worked beside who'd sworn they'd never grow old, never lose their hands or their pride. Most didn't live long enough to test that promise. I had, and somehow that made the world treat me like a relic instead of proof. That night, after lights out, I wrote a letter addressed to myself, to future Frank. It wasn't a goodbye, not really. It was insurance. I wrote everything I knew, Caleb's forged signatures, the fake power of attorney, the financial transfers, the ticket. I detailed dates, names, and motives in my cleanest handwriting. At the bottom, I wrote one final line. "If I disappear, this letter tells you why." I folded it neatly, sealed it in an envelope, and tucked it into the air vent above the bed. The sound of the metal grate sliding back into place was almost soothing, a small mechanical heartbeat, promising that truth wouldn't die quietly. The next morning, Bert woke before dawn, which was unusual. He watched me for a while before saying, "You ain't as lost as they think, old man." I smiled faintly. Guess not. He chuckled, wheezing through his chest. I used to work law offices, back when my brain worked better. You're building a case, aren't you? Something like that. Good, he said. Just don't forget, paper's louder than shouting. That line stuck with me. For the first time, Bert felt like an ally, not just a ghost in the other bed. By the second day, tension ran through the halls. I could feel it in the air, like static before lightning. Tasha slipped into my room during rounds, closing the door quietly behind her. Your son called, she whispered. He's coming early. Tomorrow, not Friday. A jolt ran through me. Then we're ahead of schedule, I said. She hesitated. Are you sure about this? You'll have to keep the act going the whole time, I nodded. If he thinks I'm weak, he'll show his hand. Tasha hid the financial folder in her locker, safe from Caleb's reach. When she left, I felt both fear and a strange exhilaration. For months, I'd been the hunted man. Now, for the first time, I was setting the trap. That night, sleep refused to come. The rain outside turned the window into a blurred mirror. I could see my own reflection layered over the lightning that split the sky. I remembered climbing poles in storms like this, feeling electricity hum through the lines while I balanced 40 feet up. Fear had always been part of the job, but control made it bearable. Control turned danger into discipline. This plan felt the same. As I sat watching the rain, my mind drifted to the last argument I ever had with Caleb. It was 2 months before Helen's funeral. He'd said the house was too much work and suggested selling it. You don't need space for 2 people anymore, Dad, he'd said. I'd told him no. He'd smiled tight, but the light in his eyes had gone cold. That was when I should have known, when his love shifted into calculation. Before dawn, I made one final call from the staff phone at the end of the hall. Blue Ridge Haven, this is Richard Harmon, volunteer legal representative, I said, lowering my voice. Confirming tomorrow's visitor log entry for Caleb Ellison. The receptionist on the other end didn't question it. Confirmed for 10:30 a.m., she replied. Perfect. Now I had proof of his arrival if things went south. Back in my room, Bert stirred again. Storm's rolling in, he murmured. Yeah, I said softly. About time. I stood at the window, lightning flashing over the mountains, thunder rumbling like an approaching verdict. Tomorrow, the current would change direction. And for the first time in years, I felt the raw charge of power humming under my skin again. The morning after the storm, the mountains looked washed clean, but the air inside Blue Ridge Haven still carried static. Lightning flickered far off over the ridgeline, the kind that hummed faintly before striking. I sat in my chair by the window, the picture of confusion, robe half-buttoned, hair mussed, a faraway look in my eyes. My act had to be flawless. At 10:30 sharp, my son would walk through that door, and the performance I'd been rehearsing for days would begin. The hall buzzed louder than usual. Nurses rushed from room to room, whispering that an important visitor was on the premises. I heard Tasha's voice briefly outside my door, calm and composed as always. I didn't turn when Caleb appeared. I could feel his presence before he spoke, a mix of cologne, arrogance, and nerves. Hey, Dad, he said with a smile that didn't touch his eyes. You remember me? I blinked slowly and squinted. Do I know you? I asked, letting my voice wobble. He chuckled, setting a clipboard on the tray table. That's okay. I expected that. Behind him, a nurse cooed, You're such a good son, Mr. Ellison. Not many would visit this often. He thanked her, charming as ever. As soon as she left, his tone shifted. We need to handle some paperwork. Just a few things for your care. I stared at him, feigning confusion, while my heart thudded steady and cold. He pulled a paper from the folder, a guardianship reaffirmation, giving him complete control again. Just sign here, he said softly. You don't need to worry about the details. I let my hand tremble as I reached for the pen. Helen will be mad if I sign something she doesn't like, I murmured, using my late wife's name on purpose. Caleb sighed. Mom's gone, Dad. Remember? I blinked at him, wide-eyed and innocent. She is? He exhaled sharply, irritation breaking through his polished mask. Just sign the damn paper. The door creaked then. Bert's wheelchair rolled in slowly. His voice cracked the silence like a hammer. Hey, Frank, that your boy again? The one who had you sign all them papers last time? Caleb froze mid-motion. What? Bert grinned, toothless but triumphant. Yeah, I remember him. Thought you said he was a real estate guy. Looks more like a vulture to me. The nurse down the hall turned her head at the noise. Caleb's fake smile twitched. He tried to recover, laughing too loudly. You know how it is in here. Everyone's confused. But I wasn't confused anymore. Slowly, deliberately, I set the pen down and straightened my back. The fog lifted from my voice. I remember plenty, son. His eyes narrowed. What are you doing? I remember every check you forged, I said, each word clear and sharp. Every lie you told your mother before she died. Every paper you made me sign. He stared at me, stunned, and for the first time, I saw something new in his face. Fear. I reached beneath the blanket and pressed a small button. The voice recorder in my lap had been running since the moment he entered. Caleb's composure shattered. You think this changes anything? No one will believe you. The door swung open again. Tasha stood there, and beside her was a man in a gray suit, Aaron Blake, the volunteer attorney. We believe him, Aaron said coolly, holding a folder. And so will the court. We have documented evidence of forged financial transfers and fraudulent guardianship claims. Caleb's face went pale. You're lying. Aaron handed the papers to the nearest nurse. You might want to read this before he leaves. Caleb lunged toward Esme, fury overtaking charm. You think you can destroy me? After everything I did for you. I didn't flinch. You didn't do it for me, I said quietly. You did it to me. Security arrived within minutes, drawn by the shouting. The same nurse who had called him a good son now avoided his eyes. Caleb struggled as the guards took his arm, still shouting, You're sick, Dad! They're using you! But the evidence was already out. The forged signatures, the recordings, the witnesses, it was all there. The power had shifted. As they led him down the hall, I caught a glimpse of his face. No anger now, just disbelief, like a man watching a house burn and realizing he built it himself. When the door shut behind him, the room fell silent. Bert wheeled closer, smirking. Guess you fixed another circuit, huh? Tasha placed a steady hand on my shoulder. You did it, Mr. Ellison. Outside, thunder cracked over the mountains again, shaking the glass. I looked toward the storm and exhaled. Not yet, I said softly. The current's just starting to flow. The lightning flashed once more, washing the room in white. This time, I didn't flinch. The silence that followed Caleb's removal was heavier than any shouting match. The echoes of his voice still lingered in the hallway, bouncing off the sterile walls like a ghost that refused to leave. Nurses whispered, administrators darted in and out of offices, and the residents watched me as if I had stepped out of a different world. I sat by the window, the storm outside finally breaking into a drizzle, my reflection dim against the glass. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt hollow. My son had tried to erase me from my own life. That truth was more painful than any betrayal I could have imagined. I thought about Helen, about how she would have handled this. She'd have said, He's still your boy, Frank. Somewhere under all that greed, but the son she meant had vanished years ago, replaced by a man who saw love as leverage and blood as currency. A soft knock came at the door. Tasha stepped in first, followed by Aaron, still in his gray suit from the confrontation. He carried a folder thick with paperwork. It's done for now, he said. The facility has filed an incident report. The legal documentation you provided is secure, and the DOJ will likely take an interest once we forward the evidence. Tasha leaned against the wall, her eyes steady on me. He'll try to fight this, Mr. Ellison. Men like that don't back down easy. I nodded slowly. He'll try to rewrite the story. He always does. Aaron's brow furrowed. You're safe here for now. but I'd recommend transferring to another facility until the case is formalized. Somewhere with less access. Safe, I murmured. You can't put a padlock on memory, Aaron. He'll find another way. They both exchanged glances. After they left, the room fell quiet again. For the first time since the confrontation, I felt the exhaustion hit. My body trembled, not from fear, but from the weight of everything that had happened. I stared out the window, watching the rain streak the glass like veins of light. When exactly had my love for my son turned into an act of survival against him? I remembered teaching him to ride a bike, his little hands gripping the handlebars, his voice shouting, "Don't let go, Dad!" And I never did. I ran beside him until my legs burned. Somewhere along the line, he stopped asking me to hold on, and I never noticed when he rode away for good. By evening, I had reached the edge of myself. Part of me wanted to let it all go, to let the law handle it, to fade into anonymity and live quietly in the shadow of this battle. But another part, the part that had climbed electric poles in thunderstorms, refused. That part wanted truth, justice, dignity. The next morning, Tasha entered with a look that told me she'd seen something bad. "He's already started," she said. "Caleb's gone to the media. He's telling them you're being manipulated by outsiders, that you're mentally unstable." She hesitated. "There's already a story online." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Then anger surged. Not the wild kind, but cold, precise, electric. "Then it's time to tell the real story," I said. Aaron arrived within the hour. "Going public will make you a target," he warned. "You'll be under scrutiny. The press, the courts, everyone will be watching." "Good," I said. "Let them watch. I've spent months being invisible. That ends now." He studied me for a long moment before nodding. "Then we'll do this properly. We'll record a statement, gather proof of competence, and make sure every claim he's made collapses under fact." Tasha smiled faintly. "You're turning the current back on, aren't you?" I grinned despite myself. One wire at a time. That afternoon, Dr. Levine came for the evaluation. A calm woman with intelligent eyes, she spoke to me for nearly 3 hours. She asked about my childhood, my late wife, my career, my memory. When she stood to leave, she said, "Mr. Ellison, I've seen confusion. I've seen delusion. But you're the clearest man I've met this month." That night, I dreamed of Helen. She sat at our old kitchen table, sunlight glowing around her like she'd brought it with her. She didn't speak, but I heard her voice all the same. "Don't let anger write your story, Frank. Let truth do it." When I woke, my pillow was wet, and my heart was steady. I took my notebook and wrote at the top of a new page, "Frank Ellison, born 1958, not incompetent, not forgotten." Then I signed it, pressing hard enough to dent the paper. Beneath it, I wrote 4 words, "I remember everything." The next morning, I walked through the halls without pretending anymore. Heads turned, people nodded. Even the staff seemed to stand taller. I had made my choice. I wasn't hiding. I wasn't surviving. I was fighting. In the reflection of the window, my eyes looked older but sharper. "I'm not done yet," I whispered, and for the first time I truly believed it. 3 days after the statement went public, the world started closing in. It began with a local news segment, a soft-voiced anchor standing outside Blue Ridge Haven, saying words like "shocking allegations" and "betrayal of trust." My name rolled off her tongue as if it belonged to a stranger. They showed my picture, the one Tasha had taken for the statement, and for the first time in years, I saw myself not as a victim, but as a headline. By the second day, the story had gone national. Elder abuse, financial exploitation, son accused of defrauding his aging father. My phone at the nurse's station wouldn't stop ringing. Advocates, lawyers, reporters, all wanting a quote, a follow-up, a soundbite. I ignored most of them. I wasn't chasing attention. I just wanted the truth to breathe. But truth never walks alone. It drags opinion behind it. Some called me brave, others called me confused. "Sad case of manipulation," one online post read. Another said, "This man's a hero." My dad went through the same thing. Tasha printed out a few of the comments, laying them on my tray. You shouldn't read these, she warned. I read everyone anyway. The praise didn't lift me, and the cruelty didn't crush me. They both reminded me that once you tell your story, it stops belonging to you. Aaron returned that afternoon with the kind of expression that meant both progress and pain. He dropped a folder on the table. The Department of Justice has officially opened a preliminary case. It's real now, Frank? I nodded, staring at the folder. What happens next? They'll investigate Caleb's accounts, your estate transfers, everything tied to those forged documents. But it means your life will be an open book. My life already was, I said quietly. He just wrote his name over every page. That night, I couldn't sleep. The hum of the ventilation system sounded almost like the buzz of a power line. I thought about how predictable electricity was. It always followed the path you gave it. People didn't. Family didn't. Love could twist into greed without a single warning spark. The next morning, Tasha came in holding something that made my breath catch, a faded envelope. Found this in your old suitcase, she said softly. It's addressed to you. The handwriting was Helen's. I opened it with shaking hands. Frank, it began. If you're reading this, it means I'm gone, and you're probably carrying more than you should. Promise me you won't let Caleb's ambition eat away at what's left of your kindness. Protect yourself, even if it means protecting yourself from him. I couldn't finish the rest. Her words were both a wound and a warning from beyond time. Tasha touched my shoulder gently. She knew, I whispered. She saw this coming. But the world wasn't done turning. That afternoon, Aaron stormed back in, jaw tight. Caleb's attorney just filed a counterclaim, he said. They're accusing us of manipulating you for financial gain. It's all over the press. I laughed bitterly. He's still trying to own the truth. The next day, Aaron released my recorded statement, the 10-minute video we'd titled I Remember Everything. In it, I sat in my chair and told the story, plain and calm. No theatrics, no anger, just the truth. Within 48 hours, it went viral. Thousands of people shared it, calling me the man who fought back. Letters began arriving, some from strangers thanking me, others from sons and daughters who had been through the same betrayal. One note read simply, "You reminded me that dignity doesn't expire." The victory felt strange. For every message of support, there were still people who doubted me. Winning doesn't bring family back, I told Tasha one evening as we sorted through letters. She smiled sadly. No, she said, but it keeps others from losing theirs. That night, I woke to find Bert's bed empty. A nurse came in a few minutes later, her face pale. I'm sorry, Mr. Ellison. Bert passed quietly in his sleep. She placed a folded note on my nightstand. It read, "Papers louder than shouting." I sat there for a long time, holding that note like it was a live wire. Bert had understood what I was fighting for better than anyone. I tucked his words into my notebook beside Helen's letter. Together, they felt like anchors keeping me from drifting into bitterness. The next morning, Aaron returned with a new document, an official court notice. The preliminary hearing is set for 2 weeks from today, he said. This is where it really begins. I took the pen from his hand and signed where he pointed, my signature steady, deliberate. When he left, I turned back to the window. The rain had stopped. For the first time in weeks, sunlight touched the Blue Ridge peaks, warm and blinding. I could see my reflection in the glass, older, weathered, but unmistakably alive. This isn't the end, I said softly, but it's finally the beginning of truth. And for the first time since Caleb abandoned me on my birthday, I felt something stronger than anger, peace wrapped in purpose. The 2 weeks before the hearing moved like wet cement, slow, heavy, but setting into something permanent. Every morning, Aaron arrived with folders under his arm, ready to walk me through the details again. Clarity is everything, he reminded me. They'll try to twist your words. Don't fight their traps, just tell your truth. I nodded, though the truth didn't need rehearsing. It had been seared into me long before any courtroom would hear it. The staff treated me differently now. They used to speak to me like I was fading. Now they addressed me like a man preparing for war. Even the administrator, who had once signed off on Caleb's access to my records, avoided my gaze when passing by. Justice had a way of rearranging power in a room. It didn't shout, it hummed quietly, like a voltage waiting for release. Then came the headlines. Caleb's lawyers had started leaking documents, old health notes, quotes twisted out of context. Elderly Father May suffer from cognitive decline, one read. Mental competence in question, another. I should have been angry, but instead I felt calm. For the first time, I understood his desperation. Men like Caleb couldn't control the truth, so they tried to discredit the voice that carried it. Tasha brought me the mail one afternoon, a thick stack of envelopes. "You've got fans, Mr. Ellison," she said with a tired smile. Inside were letters from people I had never met, seniors who had been scammed by relatives, caregivers thanking me for speaking up, and children apologizing for things they could no longer undo. One note simply read, "Thank you for remembering when so many forget." That one I pinned to my wall. That night, Ruby, the night nurse who'd been gone during the chaos weeks earlier, came into my room. Her eyes looked tired, and her voice trembled. "Mr. Ellison, there's something I need to tell you," she whispered. "Months ago, before all this started, I overheard your son talking to the administrator. He was offering her money, cash, to get access to your files. I should have said something then, but I was afraid." I looked at her, surprised but not shocked. Fear had made good people silent for centuries. "It's never too late to tell the truth," I said gently. "The power's still on if you flip the switch." She smiled through tears. "I'll tell Aaron tomorrow." "I just thought you should know." When I told Aaron, his face lit up. "That's new evidence," he said, already jotting notes. "It corroborates the timeline perfectly." For the first time since we'd started, I saw a hint of excitement in him. A spark that maybe, just maybe, this case was about to turn decisively in our favor. The rest of the days blurred together, legal prep, therapy sessions, and quiet moments staring out at the autumn hills beyond the glass. I was tired, but it wasn't the exhaustion of defeat. It was the weariness of rebuilding something worth saving. The night before the hearing, I dreamed of Helen again. She stood in front of our old house, sunlight breaking over her shoulders. She didn't speak with sorrow this time. She smiled. The same soft, unshakable smile she'd worn the day we married. "You've done what I couldn't, Frank," she said. "You made him face himself." When I woke, the dawn light spilled across my hands, and for once, I felt no fear. The morning of the hearing was sharp and cold. I wore my best shirt, polished my shoes, and fastened my old watch, still ticking after all these years. Tasha and Aaron walked beside me as we entered the courthouse. Cameras flashed outside, but I didn't look away. "They can see me now," I said quietly. "Let them." Inside, the air was thick with tension. Caleb sat across the aisle, clean-cut, composed, but his eyes darted too much. When the judge called the session to order, Aaron presented documents. Helen's letter, Ruby's testimony, and financial transfers marked by Caleb's signature. Each revelation felt like thunder echoing through the room. When it was my turn to speak, I stood, every muscle trembling, not from fear, but from the weight of truth carried too long. I told my story simply. No anger, no embellishment, just the facts of a father betrayed by his son. Halfway through, Caleb snapped. "He's lying!" he shouted, standing to his feet. The judge banged the gavel. "Mr. Ellison, you will sit down." I turned toward him, voice steady. "You can lie about my mind, Caleb," I said, "but not about your own conscience." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the fluorescent lights seemed to hum quieter. For the first time, my son couldn't look me in the eye. When the hearing ended, Aaron placed a hand on my shoulder. "They'll deliberate for a few days," he said, "but I think we've already won." I stepped outside into the crisp air, sunlight warming my face. I looked at my watch, then at the courthouse steps. "Whatever the verdict," I said softly, "I already did." I had remembered. The days after the hearing felt like the calm after a long storm. Quiet, almost too quiet. The air in the facility carried a strange stillness, as if the walls themselves were waiting for news. I spent my mornings by the window, the weak winter sunlight painting lines across my hands. Every knock on the door, every ring of a distant phone made my pulse quicken. The waiting was worse than the fight itself. For all my confidence in court, doubt crept in at night like a cold draft. What if justice looked the other way again? Then, one morning, it happened. The phone on the nightstand buzzed. My hand shook as I picked it up. Aaron's voice came through, tired but alive with energy. "Frank," he said, "we did it. The court ruled in your favor." For a moment, I couldn't speak. My heart thudded, a deep, slow rhythm like a drum signaling peace after war. What about Caleb?" I finally asked. Aaron exhaled. "He's been charged with multiple counts: fraud, elder exploitation, forgery. The judge froze his accounts and ordered restitution. Your rights and property are fully restored." I closed my eyes. No fireworks, no cheers, just breath. "Thank you," I whispered. When I put the phone down, Tasha was standing in the doorway. "Is it done?" she asked softly. I nodded. She let out a laugh and clapped her hands, calling for the others. A few nurses came in, smiling, offering congratulations. But I couldn't move. The weight I'd carried for months was suddenly gone, leaving behind a strange emptiness. "It's over," I murmured. "It's really over." Later that day, Aaron stopped by in person. His tie was loosened, eyes rimmed with exhaustion. "You're free, Frank," he said. "Not just legally, emotionally. You did it." I didn't feel triumphant. Relief and sorrow mixed in my chest like oil and water. I had won, yes, but at the cost of a son I once would have died to protect. 2 days later, a news segment flickered across the TV in the lounge. Caleb being escorted into the courthouse, wrists bound in cuffs. He looked small, pale, like a man unmoored. The reporter spoke about the sentencing hearing, the charges, the betrayal. I turned down the volume and stared at the screen. "You could have had everything that mattered," I whispered. There was no joy in watching his fall, only a quiet ache that love could curdle into something so destructive. The following week, Aaron returned with a folder. "The court authorized restitution of your assets," he said. "They have recovered part of the home sale, your pension, and a few smaller investments. It's enough for you to live comfortably and to start something new." I smiled faintly. "You helped me get it back." He shook his head. "You helped yourself." I just turned on the light. That evening, as I sat on the porch, Tasha joined me with her laptop. "There's a nonprofit in DC that works with seniors who've been financially exploited," she said. "They saw your case on the news. They want you to tell your story." "Tell it?" I asked. "Publicly," she said. "They think it'll give others courage." At first, the thought of it made my stomach tighten. I'd lived under too many eyes already, judges, reporters, strangers who thought they knew my pain. But then I remembered Helen's letter, "Protect yourself and protect others." Maybe she had meant this moment. "All right," I said, "just one interview." The studio lights were bright, but I didn't flinch. I spoke plainly, no revenge, no bitterness, just truth. I told them what it was like to be silenced, to be treated as obsolete, and to find your voice again when the world had written you off. "They took my voice," I said at the end, "so I learned to speak louder." The interviewer didn't say a word. She just nodded. The next week, an envelope arrived with no return address. Inside was a letter, the handwriting unmistakable. "Caleb, you were right. I lost sight of what mattered. I don't expect forgiveness. I just hope you find peace." I read it twice, folded it carefully, and walked outside to the small courtyard. The fire pit crackled to life with a handful of dry wood. I set the letter down and watched as the flames curled around it, turning words to smoke. "You can't rebuild on ashes," I said quietly. The next morning, I felt lighter. I spent more time with Tasha and Ruby, who had become my family in ways blood had failed to be. Aaron visited on weekends, bringing updates about the legal aid fund we'd started, the Remember Project. It would help others like me find justice. One dawn, I walked out to the garden. The sun rose over the mountains, bathing everything in gold. "Helen," I whispered, "we made it." And as the light touched my face, I knew it was true. The fight had ended, not with vengeance, but with peace. Months have passed since the verdict, and the air in my new town feels cleaner, thinner, maybe, but free. The courtrooms, the flashing cameras, even the long, tense nights have faded into memory. I wake each morning to the sound of the wind through pine trees and the whoop hum of life beginning again. The house is small, perched at the edge of a ridge overlooking the valley, but it's mine. Every brick, every breath of quiet space belongs to me. I've started tending a little garden out back, tomatoes, lavender, and a stubborn patch of mint that refuses to stay contained. Watching things grow again feels like an act of defiance, a quiet kind of resurrection. I spend my afternoons writing letters, some to people who reached out after my story aired, others to myself. I answer every message I can. Widows who lost savings to their children's schemes, veterans tricked by false caretakers, lonely elders who say they finally feel seen. I tell them the same thing I tell myself. You're not done yet. Age doesn't mean erasure. Sometimes it's just the world's way of forcing you to slow down long enough to see what really matters. Peace came slowly. It didn't roar in like victory. It crept in gently, the way light fills a room at dawn. But even peace carries shadows. Some nights, I walk through the house and imagine Caleb as a child again, his laughter echoing down the hallway, his small hands tugging at my sleeve, begging for one more story before bed. For a long time, those memories hurt. Now, they simply exist, like faded photographs in my mind. I've learned that forgiveness doesn't mean letting someone back into your life. It means freeing yourself from the weight of their actions. One morning, Aaron drove up from the city, snow dusting his shoulders. "Frank," he said, grinning, "you're not going to believe this. The Remember Project, it's gone national. We've got funding from 3 states, and your story inspired something bigger. They're calling it the Ellison Act." I laughed, shaking my head. "You mean my name's in a law?" He nodded. "You turned your pain into protection for others." For a moment, I couldn't speak. My chest tightened, not from grief this time, but pride. Helen would have loved that. She always said the only way to survive hardship was to make it useful. A week later, the same journalist who'd once interviewed me came by for a follow-up. She found me sitting on the porch, a mug of coffee steaming in my hands. "You look different," she said. "Lighter?" "I stopped living in the courtroom of my own mind," I told her. She smiled, scribbling the words down. Months later, when the article came out, that line became the headline. Life has become beautifully simple. Every Sunday, I host a small gathering at my home. Neighbors bring pie, coffee, stories, and laughter. Ruby visits with her grandkids, who fill the place with noise and energy. Tasha brings her famous chili, claiming it's better than mine. It isn't, but I let her win. For years, my house had been filled with silence. Now, it hums with the rhythm of living. One afternoon while cleaning, I stumbled upon an old shoebox I hadn't opened in years. Inside was a birthday card from Helen, still sealed. My hands shook as I unfolded it. Her handwriting curved across the page. "Don't let loneliness make you forget who you are." I smiled and placed it on the mantel beside a photo of the mountains at dawn. Her words felt like sunlight. Not long after, I recorded a short video for the Remember Project's website. I looked into the camera and said, "If they silence you, start speaking. If they take your home, build another kind of home, in yourself." The team said the clip went viral, but I didn't care about that. What mattered was that someone out there, someone forgotten, might hear it and remember they still had fight left in them. Then came a letter. It arrived without a return address, the handwriting instantly familiar. "Caleb." Inside, a single page. "I've accepted my sentence. I'm getting help. You were right. I hope you found peace." I didn't cry this time. I just folded the letter and tucked it beside Helen's card. Then I wrote a note of my own. I forgive you, son. But I no longer wait for you. I didn't mail it. Some words are meant to stay where they can't do harm. This morning, I walked out to the garden, cane in hand, as the sun rose over the valley. The light spilled across the mountains, soft and golden. We made it, love, I whispered to Helen. The wind rustled through the trees, like her laughter carried on the breeze. Getting older doesn't make you invisible. It makes you a keeper of truths the world has forgotten. Betrayal taught me that love without respect is hollow, but self-respect, once reclaimed, can light 1,000 lives. I am no longer just a man who was left behind. I am the proof that no one is too old to begin again. In the quiet that follows every storm, there comes a moment when the heart learns how to breathe again. It's the moment when pain no longer defines you, when the weight of betrayal begins to loosen its hold, and the silence that once felt like punishment turns into peace. Life has a way of testing how much we can lose before we learn what truly matters. Sometimes it strips away comfort, love, and even trust, only to remind us that dignity, once reclaimed, is the foundation of freedom. Forgiveness isn't about forgetting or excusing what was done. It's about reclaiming power from the moments that tried to break you. It's about standing tall in the ruins and realizing that survival itself is a quiet kind of victory. The world often measures strength in noise, in the loudness of success or revenge, but real strength lives in the calm after, the ability to rise with grace, to heal without needing to hurt back. In the end, life's greatest redemption is not found in justice served, but in peace earned. To rebuild, to forgive, to keep walking even when your heart still remembers the ache, that is courage in its purest form. Every ending holds within it the possibility of renewal, and when the light returns, it doesn't erase the scars, it shines through them, turning what was once broken into something unshakably whole. The journey through betrayal and loss is not the story of defeat. It's the story of becoming, of learning that even in the twilight of life, one can still begin again, not out of bitterness, but out of the quiet wisdom that freedom begins the moment you stop living in the shadows of what was and start embracing the beauty of what can still be. These turning points remind us that setting boundaries and valuing ourselves is not just an act of courage, it's the foundation of living with dignity. Now, I'd love to hear from you. What's one lesson from this story that you feel connected to, and how will you apply it in your own life? Let's grow together by sharing our thoughts. If this story resonated with you, drop a 1 in the comments. If not, feel free to leave a 0. Your feedback helps us improve. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories that touch the heart and spark reflection. Thank you for watching, and here's to living life with strength, honesty, and authenticity.